Welcome back to Birchwood Hotel and Conference Centre, and of course it is day 4 of the African National Congress's 5th NGC, and I'm joined by Mzwandile Mbeje and Sophie Mokoena here from SABC just to talk through some of the developments here at the 5th NGC. And I suppose a good place to start would be to talk about what we don't know yet with regard to what's going on in these commissions, and of course some of the discussions about organizational review and a whole myriad of other topics. Mzwandile?
Oh yes, and I think we'll have the opportunity to at least have a sense of what happened, because we expect that, I think, from 10 a.m. today, so those commissions that have been meeting, so we'll report back in terms of how the negotiations, rather the discussions transpired. But of course, we do get a sense in some of the topical ones, the feeling perhaps of the delegates, obviously the most prominent one being the SACP and the alliance and what has been happening in that space. So that is quite interesting. But also one of the things that the Secretary General did yesterday, giving an indication really of where the party is going. And I know earlier we were speaking about the issue around the KZN and the overhaul, and I'm sure that is one of the issues that people will look at, not only isolating KZN only, because other provinces as well are having their own difficulties. Remember, the PTT is in KZN, isn't here, it's here in Gauteng, and then of course the branches in other provinces, so that needs to really be looked at and strengthened. So those would be the other areas other than what we know.
And that goes to the heart of organizational renewal. And just before we come to KZN, Sophie, there was also mention in terms of looking at that renewal, where mention was made about the step aside of people like Senzo Mkunu, like Malusi Gigaba and Fikile Mbalula, basically pointing to those as examples of how the organization is renewing itself and reinventing.
Well, I think he pointed out to an example. When you look at the previous NGC, you didn't come here with people who had those kinds of issues to resolve as it relates to step aside. But to prove that something is being done, it might not be in a pace where South Africans will expect the ANC to be in, but the fact that you don't have Senzo Mkunu here because of step aside voluntarily, remember, including Malusi Gigaba, step aside voluntarily, Pule Mabi, step aside voluntarily, but the Veterans League, and the good thing is that the Veterans League has got nothing to lose. These are people who are not going to contest positions, strategic positions in the ANC, particularly in the top 5, who can then speak with authority and be honest with the ANC. They are the ones who are supposed to be a voice of reason, because nobody can say, so and so, a veteran, is saying this because he or she wants to be a Secretary General or a chairperson or a president. Therefore, they have to be a voice of reason. And they are saying, let's go far. Let's recommend that during the policy conference, we must amend the ANC policy as it relates to step aside, that it shouldn't only be step aside from ANC. You must step aside in all the positions where you are deployed also. For example, in Parliament, you must also step aside in Parliament, which makes sense, because when you want the votes, the people who vote for political parties, all of them, are not only their members, because when you look at membership of political parties are very small. It's ordinary citizens. And when ordinary citizens are complaining about corruption and perception of corruption, the ordinary people vote for you to go to legislatures, the biggest one being Parliament. And therefore, when you step aside from ANC, you're stepping aside from the converted. But if you step aside from Parliament, you are sending a signal to the ordinary South Africans who have voted for the party that you have listened or you are responding you are showing seriousness. So I think the Veterans League, their position to say, let's go to the policy conference, which will be in 2027, before the elective conference to present this for amendment, and the conference will then decide whether they do adopt. And when the conference has adopted that recommendation or that policy proposal, then it will become ANC policy. So I think it's those kinds of discussions that I hope they will really pay attention to, not only, as Nuki Zigalala pointed out during the interview with SABC, but whether in the commission this is gaining traction. And therefore, and also the fact that you had their former president sitting in the organizational renewal. He is supposed not to be conflicted. He has to help them to reach the peak and the pace of renewing itself. You had the former deputy president of the ANC and the former secretary general, vast experience, Kgalema Motlanthe, in the Battle of Ideas Commission, which is, are we communicating very well? The ANC, what is doing and the shortfalls and admitting, talking to people, reaching out. And then you had the president, the current president, in the ETC, economic transformation, because he has to deal with issue of the economy of the country, and he has to take on board the ANC to support him in terms of how do you address this current problem of your economy, because if you don't do that, the country is going to be restless. As we see, people are not employed, people are suffering. You have to attend or pay attention to the economy.
So in other words, the former presidents choosing their commissions very strategically.
Very strategic.
But then, of course, what we saw, and just to Sophie's point before I move on to some of the other matters, it's easier said than done. The whole issue around step aside, and we can talk about people stepping aside voluntarily. It took them quite an age to get to that point of stepping aside, albeit voluntarily. And it is clear, obviously, that it is all of the political implications that come into the decision-making process. How does the ANC go about, crafting a policy that takes care of all of those gray areas so that it becomes clear? If this happens, this is what you need to do.
I guess part of, I think, the arguments and the debates was around the constitutionality of the step-aside rule as well. You'd recall that at some point it was subjected to that to say, is it in line with the Constitution? And also, you would have someone who is an ANC member and is employed elsewhere, not necessarily as a deployment, which is totally different. So you step aside on ANC matters. What if you are employed completely outside of what would be a deployment? So you still have a livelihood to take care of. So what happens in that regard? Especially if, let's say, you feel you are actually innocent, because I think there are also those grey areas that I think they need to look at. It may be a bit more different when you are serving at the behest of the party. So the party now decides that you step aside from its activities. Obviously, that would somehow be linked to that deployment in which you are. But it may be a bit difficult if you happen to be a member of the NEC and then employed completely away from what the party would have deployed.
But the Senzo Mchunu issue shows us that even at as far as the state goes, where you have the president who have people serving at his behest, struggling to make a decision, which one would think ordinarily should not be a difficult decision. Because this is not about personal feelings, so to speak.
Mzwandile Mbeje did it.
And that's my point. So, where it seems to be the president is struggling with a decision that is more rooted in political machinations than it is about the optics of, his presidency and having someone who is implicated in a very serious matter, especially given what we are seeing now coming through in the Madlanga Commission and the ad hoc committee. And yet the president seemed to not be able to just sever ties there.
I think The good example is Zweli Mkhize, Dr. Zweli Mkhize. When that issue of the allegations on PPE and the digital vibes after the COVID challenge, he voluntarily left government.
Even if he
Which
doesn't.
is stop aside. What I'm saying is, I think ANC members themselves, if you are about the people, you are about the country, you are about the continent, you are about the world, you are a leader, you are a servant, like Madiba used to say, I'm a servant. Sometimes it's up to you also to do the right thing, and that's what Zweli Mkhize did. We're still waiting for him to be charged, and all of that is delayed.
Ethical
But
leadership will
yes,
dictate.
yes, yes.
But
That-
also, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's also a grey area there because it's still in parliament, and that's a deployment of the party.
That's why I'm saying what the veterans are recommending, that as you improve and show the nation and the country and the continent and the world that you are serious to undo wrong things or to correct or self-correct, you have to continuously look at those gray areas. You are correct. That's why I spoke about what the Veterans League is saying as it relates to the legislature, which is much easier because remember, all those members of parliament in parliament, none of them have been voted directly. It's the party.
Make it easy for me to understand. You are the president. Sophie and I, you ask us to serve in your cabinet. Then I am accused of, doing something untoward. You are the president. You have appointed me and you can relieve me of that responsibility.
Yeah.
What makes it so difficult?
I think perhaps you'll have to look at the kind of a person we are speaking about here, because we are specific.
So it's
on
about politics, is what you're going
It's about
to say.
President Ramaphosa. Maybe let me get somewhere before I go there. I think one of the things, perhaps one of the traits of this current president is that even if he has to take a decision, so he needs to be sure. He always wants to be process-driven. So there is a report that we expect to be submitted to him on the 17th of December. Perhaps that question, maybe a month later, we should be able to ask to say, given that you have some sort of a report, some sort of something to take a decision on, so what is it that you are doing? And also, maybe to your point about politics, as much as you are the president, you are still a member of the party. There is still politics at play. It doesn't matter how much
but I'm bringing your party into disrepute.
Yeah. But remember, there's a lot more that is happening in the party itself, because some of the decisions you have to be calculating, because you take a particular decision, it backfires because you may not have calculated correctly. So there's a lot more involved. I know that we don't have sufficient time, but there's a lot more involved.
Within the party. What about the calculations outside the party?
Let's go to 2005. Your deputy president as the ANC and the country, allegations, Shabir Sheikh and all of that. Your president in the ANC and the president in the country take a decisive step, remove or relieve the deputy president of the country.
Yes.
Because he can do that because he appointed the deputy president. But he can't remove him from the party, which, of course, that was a decision to say, no, remain being in the party. But on this one, please, I can't because of this. What happened to the ANC? So I think sometimes it's based on fears.
Internal party dynamics.
Sometimes when we are decisive, you may ruffle feathers. And somebody was saying to me in the ANC yesterday, yes, we want to be decisive and we want to do things right, but people must be prepared that as we do that, there will be a backlash.
But the
Look
point
at
is,
the MK.
It's not going to be an easy one. It's going to be painful. As you say, the example is already there of a more senior person in a deputy president that had to be removed.
In fact, Sakina, to back her up, not only does the president of the state remove him from government, so the NEC takes a decision to say given that you are faced with this, maybe step back a bit from activities, but of course you remain the deputy president. And then the NGC
in Pretoria
2005 reverses that decision and sets the whole process in motion.
And where is
right
the
up until
party today? And that is
2007.
it. It's not just about the internal considerations for the ANC, but also external factors, because the rest of South Africa who make up the electorate are also watching and looking at what is happening. So in terms of organizational renewal, how does the party at this NGC tighten up on some of these issues? And we're going to leave it there for now. Let's pay some bills. It's back to studio.